Per 9000's game room.
Pretty much everyone will have played a movie license at one point in time. Heck, I've played a couple of movie tie-ins during these reviews, but what I don't think I've ever played yet for this series is one game which is based on an entire trilogy of movies. The majority of movie tie-ins usually release either to coincide with a film's cinema or home release, but occasionally you'll get a game made for a film that came out ages ago. Here we have a game made which is a video game interpretation of 3 films: Raiders of the Lost Ark, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, and Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. The first of which was released 13 years before this game, and the last of which was released 5 years before this game. Nowadays this kind of thing doesn't seem as strange as it did back then. After all, nowadays we get all kinds of trilogy games, usually made in Lego, but back then this was a really original proposition. So how did it come about? Well, apparently it came from the success of Super Star Wars and Super Empire Strikes Back, made by Sculpted Software. That led to LucasArts believing that maybe they should take the Indiana Jones films and do the same thing. Apparently the game was made using the same engine as the above games, and Super Return of the Jedi, but it wasn't made by Sculpted Software, it was made by Factor 5, an independent software and video game developer which was co-funded by 5 former Rainbow Arts employees in 1987 in Cologne, Germany. Factor 5 only actually made 3 games on the SNES: Super Turrican, Indiana Jones Greatest Adventures and Super Turrican 2. When I first started this review series I was only reviewing games that I actually owned on cartridge, and the Turrican games are pretty darn expensive, so I thought this was my only chance to talk about Factor 5. Although now, since I've finished the 150 written reviews, I've progressed on to reviewing things using an Everdrive cartridge. So a little bit about Factor 5. Well, I adore Factor 5. They're probably best known by most people for being the developers of the Star Wars Rogue Squadron series. The second of which, Star Wars Rogue Squadron 2 Rogue Leader, was the first ever game I grabbed for the Nintendo GameCube. It was in fact the game that made me get a cube, and I got the game and the machine about a week after their release. Still, with the first Turrican under their belt and the engine from the Super Star Wars games in their hand, what could go wrong? I remember there being a quiet buzz about this game before it was released. I would have been around 14, so in one of my later years of secondary school, which was sort of one of the best times for me games-wise. You see, I hung around in a small bunch of lads, and all of us gamed. Some of us had Super Nintendos and some had Mega Drives. I was one of the only ones to have both. We'd go to each other's houses and play games. We'd occasionally manage to beg one of our parents to have all of us around to play winner stays on Street Fighter 2 tournaments. But you know, we'd do all sorts together. We'd play games, trade games, and pretty much everything game related you could think of. One thing we also did was to show each other our gaming magazines and discuss up and coming games. Everyone was excited about this indie game, both the SNES and Mega Drive gamers. You see, originally this game was supposed to be coming to the Mega Drive. In fact, it was apparently finished and ready to be released sometime between the summer and autumn of 1995. Heck, it even got reviewed, but it never came out. Just now, this Christmas just gone, a prototype version of this game is actually leaked online, so that you can play it either in emulators or on a Mega Drive via flash media, like an Everdrive. This cut off half of the group's interest in this game. The other half seemed to get wrapped up in excitement about the PlayStation. But what about me? In all honesty, I have no idea. I just guess with everyone stopping talking about it, I forgot all about it. So when was my attention brought back to the Indiana Jones trilogy game? Well, that would be years later when walking around a local car boot, one that was held near my house every Thursday evening at 5 PM. It was a place I'd frequently visit, and there were a lot of sellers who I'd forged quite friendly relationships with. And one Thursday this cart was sitting on one of their tables with a fair bit of dirt on it and a sticker on it saying £3. Suddenly everything came back to me and I grabbed it and paid quickly. How could I have forgotten this game and ignored it up until this point? I guess I'd got excited about the upcoming next generation of machines, and I'd forgotten all about my love of Indiana Jones. How could I forget that after the approximate 300 times I'd watched the Temple of Doom, and after I'd waited for the Last Crusade to come out, and with the very fact that I had an ex-rental copy of Raiders of the Lost Ark sitting on my shelf given pride of place as well. I guess that's just the way it goes when new machines are coming out. The old ones get dropped, and sometimes later games on them just tend to pass people by. Well, basically, as soon as I'd paid for this game, I walked back to my house whistling the Indiana Jones theme and instantly started playing it. Okay, so what do you do in the game? Well, most of the time it's an action platformer. You play as Indy and you go through most of the main events in all 3 movies in order. This starts with 12 stages based on Raiders of the Lost Ark, including the iconic bit with the giant boulder. Then you have 8 stages based on Temple of Doom, and then you have 8 levels based on The Last Crusade. So what can Indy do? Well, he can run and jump around, do a tactical roll, punch, and once you pick it up you can swing his whip, and the same goes with Indy's gun. Find it and you can use it. There are also grenades to find, which are like powerful screen clearing attacks. The whip though, it's so satisfying to use, the noise it makes, the cracking animation. Yes, there are Castlevania style bits where you can use the whip to swing over gaps to previously unreachable extra lives and other pickups as well. What about when it's not an action platformer? Well, basically you have levels that totally change the game style. For a start, instead of being 2D, they're 3D, and they use the SNES's much loved Mode 7. You have, for example, a stage where you control a rubber boat sliding through the snow, a minecart chase, and a biplane riding level, all of which are based on events in the movies. These levels have their own objectives, and well, they're really good for just breaking things up a little bit. If there's anything I can say about them, it is that they are pretty awesome, and the game probably could have done with a few more of them. Okay, I've already said the game is based on the films, and that the levels reflect the films, but there are also lots of cutscenes made up of digitised pictures from the films and dialogue in text form. Add to that the fact that the game contains great 16-bit versions of some of the music from the movies, which if you're a fan of the films you'll probably recognise it straight away. But it's worth noting that the heavy majority of the tracks are taken from the first film, with only a tiny amount of them being taken from the second, and not a single tune being taken from the third film. There are also a few little pieces of digitised speech, not much but it is cool. I really love when the level starts with Indy saying, "Let's go." The presentation in the game is just top tier, and it makes the game feel like a love letter to the movies, which is brilliant when most licensors don't get this right and instead end up feeling like crummy cash grabs with no heart. Some people have complained that this game is hard, but in all honesty I find it pleasantly challenging. I realise that I haven't mentioned the graphics at all. Well, they're okay. If they were early in the SNES's life I'd say they're good, but for the late end of lifespan SNES graphics, they're not that wonderful. Still, you know what I say, gameplay is king. I say, okay, so to cut to the chase, I had a lot of expectations when it came to this game, and in honesty I think it lived up to all of them. I'd give this game a very positive 8 out of 10. Sure, it's not perfect, but it's a darn good game, particularly if you like either the Indiana Jones films, action platformers, or like me, both of these. So if you wanted to buy a cart of this, well, the cheapest I've seen it in recent days is about £25, with it often going for a lot more. If it's worth this kind of cash or not, well, that's up to you and how much you're willing to spend on Super Nintendo games. It might be worth looking for a copy of Super Star Wars first, if you don't have that, as it's a very similar game, and you can try that to test the waters and see if you're likely to enjoy this sort of thing or not. It was also on the Virtual Console on the Wii, but that's closed down now, unfortunately. Anyway, that's Kerr9000 signing off. Keep on gaming.